Hello, friends. Thank you so much for being here. As we talked about earlier, if you would like to interrupt, please do unmute and just say hey over and over until I'm stopping talking. That's all good. Or Nick will get you. But thank you very much for being here, either in person or via our YouTube channel. My name is Leslie Gartin. I am your National Vice President for Membership and Expansion. I did not just look up at the screen to remember that long title, but I am also an elementary music and talented and gifted and ESL teacher. I've been in schools for a long time, and I am well versed in the lines of conflict resolution and communication and teaching younger children, younger than yourselves, how to talk and say what they want to say. So I'm happy to share those skills with you today. So, first thing we're going to do, maybe. There we go. So, talking about this workshop is meant to help you be aware of your communication styles, your flaws. I know that's not very fun to do, but also this is a safe space to help identify those things, just to figure out how you work the way you work, and help you understand other types of communications. It's the basis of every interpersonal relationship. Interpersonal meaning between two people. In some way, communication is important for intrapersonal relationship, which is figuring yourself out. Because we all have that internal voice, and it just depends on how you talk to yourself to make that world go round in that way. It's the base of every misunderstanding possible, as much as we think miming and playing charades or anything causes issues. It's really just how our words are spoken and maybe not even necessarily what those words are. We don't often communicate or focus on it because we are constantly doing it. So, but there's always times that uh, we leave a situation and we get stuck on how we handled something with our communication. So this is kind of help us prevent that before it gets crazy, before figuring those things out too. So as we talked about, communication is more than words. We talk about facial expression and body expression a lot, but also how our voice comes out also matters. There's a lot of studies about how different cultures interact, and as an English as a second language teacher, yeah, that's right. Communication myself is tough, but just understanding cultures and how certain words are portrayed and certain body language is portrayed, also how you speak to one another. Sometimes it's a sign of respect to speak softer to maybe an elder, things like that. If you're trying to get what you want, sometimes you speak in a sweeter tone without realizing it. Just making sure and being aware of that. That kind of looks like the guy from Parks and Rec, but then after looking each time, it's not. But he looks like he's pretty happy about whatever's happening. So that's fun for him. So speaking of that further, uh, if I can get to there. So vocal tone, pitch and volume, and then body language and facial expressions. This nice lady looks super thrilled to hang out with us. I'm sure if you were across the table from someone with that expression, it would be a little disarming in trying to pick up where you left off, trying to pick up your tone, trying to pick up your voice, trying to figure out what to say to change that body image, that body structure on there is important. Context and situation. Depends if people are coming into the situation hot, if they're upset, if it's something that there's underlying things over and over again, that everything just kind of hits a fever pitch. Depends on where you are, if it's a school setting, if it's a work setting, if it's a chapter setting. We definitely use different language and different speak with our friends than we do with maybe a grandparent, maybe the director of bands versus your friends in chapter, things like that. So just being aware of our different vocal tones and our vocal understandings of how we are portrayed and what our image is on there. Communication happens everywhere. We know this. We're in a very social media aspect. My dog's upset about me talking, apparently. I don't know if you heard her groan, but she's trying to communicate that she is trying to nap, but that is enough of that. Just think about how many communications you have in a day. Do you have dozens? Probably. Maybe during break, it's not as much. Via our socials, via email, in person, text, comments on TikTok. Each one of those is a type of communication. And I know your generation understands that your digital footprint will be with you for a long time. And so I think you're really good in your generation of being careful about your words on social media, online. Um, there's definitely times I think it's more stressful than it should be. I don't want to say back in my day, but physical communication was one of the only forms of communication. We have this different layer now where you really just have to be careful with how your words work in a lot of ways. So I know I'm talking about communication a lot, but this is the key to understanding conflict and also preventative maintenance. So looking at this, it has a sender, a receiver, and a message. So it's that space between that where things get messy. Like intended doesn't necessarily mean that perceived meaning in those ways. So just being aware of that and figuring out, trying to provide some preventative maintenance, maybe choosing your words certain ways and anticipating. I think it can be a mind mess to try to anticipate what the person you're trying to communicate will say, what they will try to do, and that gets stressful. And so just words matter. I think we know that. So once again, just awareness. So looking at this, we speak at a rate of 150 words a minute, but we can hear at a rate of 1,000 words a minute. Are we daydreaming? But just talking about it again, most likely we are jumping to conclusions. We're preparing to fight back, and maybe fight's not the right word, but definitely have the next method of communication ready. And you can, it's just kind of what we do as human beings. We want to have self-preservation. We want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We want to make sure that we are getting our point across of what we want to say, no matter what the situation is. So it's an interesting factoid that's always crazy to me, is just that space in between. So what can you do to help bridge that gap? It's important to think about being an active listener. This dog looks terrified, but I don't know what's happening, but it's fine. You can just stare at that for a little bit while I talk a little bit. It's a trend in Zoom calls to turn off your camera. You guys are part of the Zoom class generation that it was when you were forced to keep your camera on. It was kind of just a slight almost, but when you are in situations where you want to show your respect, to show that you are listening, that this is something you want to do, it's important to listen intently, maintain eye contact, listen to the entire statement before making a response. Even though you maybe know where they're going next, it's just kind of a sign of respect. There's times I have to catch myself because I'll do it to my students or my family all the time. They're like, hey, shut your face for a second and just listen. Maybe I wasn't going to go there. I know you're ready to get to this, but chill out for a second. Sometimes I get too excited. Um, and then that person also uses body language that conveys their attention. This dog maybe is trying to eat our soul, but they're also active listening. So it works. We're going to move on past that because that was getting painful after a while. So it's important to have communication for conflict resolution. If things do happen where you are frustrated with someone, most likely that person won't actually know that you're frustrated with them until you bring it up. And that's really not fun to do. I totally get that, but that's how we dig into those holes without meaning to. Um, I want you to just kind of think internally of how many times, or if you want to type in the chat, or if you want to go on camera and give me a number, it's probably lots. How many times have things escalated between a personal relationship between you and another person because there was one initial frustration that just kept building? because of that lack of communication. So, and faulty communication doesn't mean that the wrong words were used. Maybe it's just that the words weren't used at all. Um, and I hope everyone can agree with me on that next statement. The worst way to resolve conflict and foster interpersonal understanding is through email and text messages. There's so many different uh, voice inflections that we could pick up on. I have a friend of mine who's the art teacher at my school that she thinks I'm sarcastic in every text message that we send back and forth. And so, like, there's times I have to say, hey, no, no, I'm okay with you doing this. Like, take out the sarcasm. I'm literally saying, sure, that sounds great. So, and maybe that's just me as a person, that she's just used to me saying those things. I'm not sure. But it's entertaining, it's frustrating. It's a lot harder to have that personal communication physically or by the phone, but it's also really important to show that respect in that way as well. So how do we use communication to our advantage? How do we get through that fight of those things? And this is hard to begin with, is using these I statements, but sorry. So it feels selfish to begin with, but if you, especially if you're unmuted, if you say these statements out loud, they're actually a lot less harsh than the you statements. So thinking about, when you talk about me, I feel hurt, instead of you're always talking about people behind their backs. You put that focus on you, which, like I said, it feels super selfish, but it takes that blame away from the next person, because that's most likely that's not their intention, is to be hurtful in that way. And so when you change that narrative and help them understand what you're feeling about the situation, that helps a lot, in my opinion. So an iMessage consists, for some reason I have Ice Cube doing things there because that's how those things work for those fun things. Nick likes it, so that's fair. Is you have the specific behavior, the resulting feeling you experience because of the behavior, and the effect the behavior had on you. So with these three parts, people understand better and it builds their relationship. So for example, I was talking with a friend on Friday and they were expressing concern. I think there was something we had going on that they use these I statements, and this was as I was building this presentation, and they said, well, when you sent that email to that director of bands without letting me know what was happening with it, that made me feel hurt that you didn't feel it was important to have that method of communication to begin with. I was hurt about this person told me, because I felt that I wasn't important enough to be a part of the conversation. So at first you feel upset as the person that you're feeling attacked, and then you kind of put yourself in that person's shoes, and you express that it was not your intention, but you can totally understand that they would feel that way, just things like that. I know that's a super vague statement, but hopefully that got my point across that way. But most of the time when we have communication issues, gosh dang it, I can never find, there it is. It's when we're angry. So actually understanding that it is that concern in those ways with this anger, that you might be quick to use words that you would not normally if you did not just take a breath and kind of figure that out. Think about what your triggers are. Think about what things, and everybody has different triggers for different people too. Maybe your boss does something that drives you crazy and you're apt to lash out more if they do that, if they give that specific behavior, that you're more curt with your message, but they don't understand why, because you've never expressed your concern about them giving that expression. So first step in this is just understanding that yes, anger does happen and it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to act out in anger towards anybody. So you're lashing out in anger when you're actually feeling this, all these different things that are involved with this. Um, and I know there are different sizes of words on here, but I'm sure certain ones speak out to you because that's kind of how our eyes work and how our brain and our body works on what things are frustrating us at that moment in that way. There's a lot of sad words in there. There's a lot of words in there that isolate. I think the ultimate key of this is the isolation. I think that's what makes us feel the most frustrated, is that feeling of isolation. Not to get Debbie Downer, but yeah. Really read that first bullet point over and over again if you can. It's easier to express because it's about the other person. Think about those I statements versus those you statements. You never do anything right, rather than my feelings were hurt when this happened because I was physically hurt. You never thought about me on this. Anger is safer because it blocks us from the other person. It doesn't let them know that we have emotions. It's a lot easier to yell than it is to cry. And that's just kind of a truth with our society and everything like that. It masks hurt, embarrassment, rejection. But thing I just really want to hit home the most is it's easier to express because it's about the other person. You're able to move that away from you. You think about that poor guy, like when I just first looked at this picture on here, I want to say GIF or GIF, but I don't want to start that meanness on there. I know, Nikki Nick, I know. But look at the apprehension of that poor man from there, because scary. So things to address these angry things, to address just different types of communication. So you want to use assertive communication. You honestly and directly express yourself without accusing, blaming, or name calling. It's not the same as aggressive. Think about in your head, if you want to share with the class, I guess I could say, what's an example of an assertive versus an angry communication in your mind? If you want to type it out, if you want to unmute, please do. If you want some examples with it, uh, just words to say are, you did this to me versus I was feeling upset when this happened, things like that. Gotta love those Ted Lasso gifs. Big fan. So I have a third grader in my music classes. His name is Sebastian. Sebastian, I have recess duty after school every day, and Sebastian has a long time love affair with throwing rocks around the playground. So I kind of used this the other day, because it's been a lot of, why are you doing that? You need to not do that and hurt the school. Go sit on this bench. Usually being meaner than that, yelling, because there's usually yelling back. Usually we'll have a showdown. I swear there's times that this kid, bless his heart, like he's going to be a great kid someday. He is now. It's just he's a little he's temperamental, we'll say that. And we've all experienced Sebastians in our life before. So I saw him on Wednesday last week, I believe. I saw him pick up a rock. I was across the playground. I was with other students. I was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And he did it. He threw it at the school. So I walked over. I didn't run over. I made sure that I was trying to be aware of my body movements, of my behavior, of my demeanor in some way, I guess you could say. And I said, I get really upset when you hurt this school because I like this school a lot. Sebastian did not drop the rocks immediately, but he went to argue, and it confused him. It disarmed the poor boy. And so his response after thinking about it, I'm upset when you don't let me throw rocks. Okay. So we moved on from there. So we're getting better. So I'm pretty happy with it. Um, if you would like updates, I have my email at the end of this session. If you would like Sebastian rock throwing updates, because I talked with my boss about it, and she's like, that's a different approach. Let's see how it goes. So we'll go from there. But so that's a difference between coming at him aggressively because feeling like he's being aggressive, trying to match his aggressiveness, kind of throwing him off using assertive communication maybe would be all the difference. Not just necessarily with elementary school kids, but with colleagues, with adults, with parents, things like that. We all, no matter what the age, we all have the same types of communication styles and everything. So here's some great tips on assertive communication. Be specific. So I said it hurt my feelings when he hurt the school because, and I gave an example because I love the school. He could understand that feeling of love towards something, you know. So be calm and steady. Make sure that you make eye contact. Make sure the person with you is making eye contact to so you can express what you want with your body language. You can express your emotions, but don't show overly, don't lead with your emotions. I think if you're upset and want to cry, don't stop from crying, but maybe take a break and wait before you're trying to have a communication while you're crying. I've done it. I've tried to cry or talk through crying too many times, and it doesn't work. You think it's going to work, and it just becomes messy. So don't confront someone in front of other people. That's kind of a no-brainer on showing dominance. You're trying to be alpha in some way. Make sure to discuss sensitive issues in private. I did pull Sebastian aside because I didn't want people laughing for me yelling at him for throwing rocks. I didn't want him to react. He might have reacted positively to understanding why he shouldn't throw rocks. But if you're accidentally embarrassing him in front of other people, it's still not going to get the point across. Unfortunately, with communication, there's so many ways to do it wrong that it's hard to find those ways to do it right. But just everybody works differently, and your own style works differently. Not everybody can roll out with the Mr. Rogers demeanor, but it works. It works for me. It works for other people in some ways. Some people it works to just kind of be clear, straightforward with emotions, just whatever works for you. Tone matters, as I've talked about multiple times. If what you say doesn't match your tone, then the message is usually not heard because mixed signals are given. Consistency is important. So keep those emotions in check, but also just show them your respect with that eye contact. A lot of times when I'm working with my students, kindergarten through 12th grade, if they are upset and I'm trying to calm them down, or if we have a communication issue we need to discuss, I will wait until they take the time to make eye contact with me. If you're talking or raising your voice at a person and they're refusing to make eye contact, that's because they're refusing to accept what you're saying. If you give them time to stop and take a breath and look at you, and so you can communicate back and forth. And sometimes that silence just disarms them. I wait for them, but that's always a good tool if you're having angry communication in some ways. That's also helps me as de-escalation techniques. Sometimes people will walk away from you. That's okay. Like they're trying to let you know that they are not in the right space to have a conversation at that moment. I know that a lot of times we'll want to address the situation. We want to get that out of the way. We want to talk through that and figure that out. But if the other person's not ready, we have to respect that. Most times, if someone's trying to walk away and you force the conversation, it does not go well. even if it's that you're trying to get your point across, that you're trying to make them feel better about themselves, that's still that communication aspect of it. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so we got a couple more slides. Hang with me. Lots of words. So it's important. One way to do this is use the tribe method. You want to tell what you're feeling and thinking using those I statements as opposed to the you statements. It's assertive versus aggressive. You want to show reflective listening. Don't just wait for your next turn to speak. That shows. And you might change your course of action based on what the other person says. That's exactly what it should be. I think sometimes we get stuck in our, not even ego, but what we think is right, that we don't feel that we are able to relate to someone else having a different mindset. But that helps you grow as a person and helps you grow up better than anything. Excuse me. Identify what is important. Think about if this is the situation or if there's something else that needs to be resolved. That's going to be part of that assertive talking and reflective listening, just trying to get to the bottom of it. It might be something from 3 years ago when you were both freshmen in your probate, trying to work through something that never got resolved that you've forgotten about. Doesn't mean someone else has forgotten about it. Just be open to understanding, and what you feel might be the real issue might be different from what the other person thinks. And so it'd be intriguing. Brainstorm possible solutions. Sometimes you don't need solutions, you just need the other person to hear one another so you can get off a better foot for the future. That's happened lots of times. There's times when I've met students or colleagues that first initial impression, not a big fan. There's something I just didn't like, but getting to know them later in time, either they matured or I've matured or just changed a little bit, that I've really liked. So it maybe is not a brainstorming situation, but lots of times it is. So if there's a communication issue, talk about what you can do better in the future, for sure. Make it about what you can do. Don't tell the other person what they need to do. That does not get received well. You don't want to be told what to do. So it goes the same way. Evaluate solutions. Try one of the solutions. Say, you're fighting with your brother because you're on Christmas break, but you have to go to work at 9 a.m. They have to go to work at 9 a.m. You both want to take a shower. You both like to wait until the last possible second to hop in that shower. So it is full of frustration, full of anxiety. Maybe the brother likes to taunt you and tease you and make you irate in that way. Figure out solutions so that doesn't keep happening. Switch off days on who's going to get that shower first. Someone take a shower the night before. Figure out things that, in some ways, you can call that being the bigger person, but really it's just figuring out how to not be super frustrated at someone else, because there's nothing worse than just an emotion suck of feeling frustrated at another person, if that makes sense. So, okay. Got two different situations. I don't think I'll pause too much for it, but I want you to think about these. If you want to copy these and take them back to your chapters, please do. Nikki, Nick, you and I can talk through this if you would like to problem solve this one together. So, counselor extraordinaire. So here's the situation. Your chapter's constitution says that each year you must have a joint fundraiser with the other chapter at your school. The two chapters can't agree on what this fundraiser should be. One chapter wants to sell shirts, and the other would like to sell chances to throw a pie in the band director's face. How do you resolve this conflict using the tribe method, using assertive statements? What do you feel?
Um, I think if I'm thriving or if I'm using assertive statements, I would say that I think that both chapters have great ideas. and that it's possible for us to maybe do both of them, even if we don't do them at the same time.
Mhm.
So maybe we could, if we could talk through it and figure out which one it would make more sense to do. Maybe we do one fall, one spring, or because I mean it just says we have to do at least one joint fundraiser. It doesn't say we can't do more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect solution, I think. I think looking at it, you could give the recommendations or help lead people to the recommendations that the t-shirt fundraiser would need some capital development, which means you would need some upfront money. So you could do that band director's pie in the face, which also that makes more sense in the fall because marching band time for most chapters, and that could be a great end of the football day or Saturday game day or something like a stress reliever, something like that. And then you could build that money and use some of that towards those shirts after that, and then keep building upon that. So I think those could work well together that way. Makes sense. Doesn't have to just be one. It's also interesting that the Constitution says a joint fundraiser. Looking at that, I'm like, all right, that's a choice. Yeah. All right, here's another one to think internally. Just because I wanted to use that graphic. Now I found that graphic later, but it's also fascinating. Don't let it paralyze your feelings. But an argument has broken out between you and a member of your chapter about a potential fundraiser of marching band socks. Neither of you are the treasurer, head of the fundraiser committee, or on the fundraiser committee. You want to make the socks, they do not. What thinking about, oh, I'm not even at the right one, sorry. There's your thing. There's your socks. Yep, found it. It's terrifying. And I just have so many questions. But so TLDR, this person, you as a chapter member don't have any say on any of our fundraiser or the fundraisers for your chapter, for your band. You really want to do something no one else does. How do you get your point across? I think ultimately you should look inwardly and try to determine why you specifically want to do this fundraiser. And if you can convince yourself, if you are compelling enough, I think you should keep at it, but also maybe in the future join fundraiser committee when you have this idea or run for treasurer in the future. It's not some problem solving doesn't have immediate solutions, but there's long games on things that's long-term things because that's life. Things don't all magically solve themselves each day. So that's fair. All right, can we move past the sock, whatever that is? Thanks. Cool. Yeah, that's all I had. We're at about 40 minutes. We're good on time. Does anyone have any additional questions or thoughts or anything? Awesome. Well, Nick and I will be here for a little bit after, but we thank you very much for your time and take forth these ideas and go forth and be great. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.